All right, this is our first class in the breeding registered show today. We have Dorset Yearling Ewes born September 1st, 2021 to August 31st, 2022. 2 entries from Grayson Long of Rockingham County and 1 from Melena Ritchie from Rockingham County.
I think we've got a competitive class as we get into the purebred show, and not a lot in here, but some give and take definitely on the end of the class. I think the ewe that begins has a definite advantage as you take her to the ground and evaluate her in terms of bone and foot and substance. She is the most proportionate when we put her to the side as far as the way she blends her chest and the way she drops back to a really full and maternal flank. A sheep that's correct in terms of her top line. She gets out and utilizes that hock and pastern, probably the most effective of anything in class. She's not as feminine ahead of her shoulder compared to the ewe that comes in second, who is just a touch more refined there at her muzzle, a little bit more feminine as you study her through the front 1/3 of her body. You put her to the side, she might have just a notch more excessive set there to her hock. A sheep that from the profile probably doesn't balance as good from her chest back to her rear rib and flank. And then of the three, that's probably the most refined as we take her to the ground and evaluate her in terms of bone and foot. Round the class out with the sheep, I'd like to shorten and strengthen just a notch there to rear pastern. She has a tendency to kind of get out and move just a notch underneath herself. A ewe that's tremendous in terms of her body shape when you get up over the top of her in terms of the spread and dimension that she has. She gets a little piecey when we put her to the side for me. She tapers there to her pin bones and gets a little bit flatter there at the base of her leg. Really good class. Let's congratulate these three exhibitors with a round of applause.
For our first class, first place, second place go to Grayson Long of Rockingham County. Third place goes to Melena Ritchie of Rockingham County. We now have a pair of yearling ewes exhibited by Grayson Long.
Got our pair here of yearling ewes. We just discussed them, but definitely some quality and some value in both of these females. Some give and take, which from a breeding perspective can be exciting. You've got a really powerful sheep that's got a tremendous foot and substance at the surface, one that is very muscular and powerful, and then you got one that has just a nickel more extension, refinement, and femininity. So that gives you some versatility in terms of breeding options. Really nice pair. Let's congratulate this exhibitor with a round of applause.
That'll be a first place for Miss Grayson Long with her pair of yearling ewes. Next up, we have Class 3. Senior ewe lambs are born September 1st, 2022 to December 2022. We have an entrance from Alyssa Kopp and Colton Spangler. Alyssa's from Washington and Colton is from Floyd.
just two entries in here, but again, extremely competitive pair. I think as you study our class winner through the front 1/3 of her body, I think that's where she's got a distinct advantage, just in the way she lays her blade there into her rib cage, the way her neck projects a notch higher off the top side of her shoulder. She's cleaner there at her breastplate, and I read her to be just a notch shallower as you study there at the floor of her chest. Her top line is probably more appropriate as we take her from the top of her blade there to the center of her hip. And I think as we put them into motion, of the two, she's the one that's just a notch more attractive in the way she utilizes her rear tube. I also view her to be quite a bit more feminine as you study her up there through the bridge of her muzzle there. And just from a quality standpoint, femininity standpoint, I like her head shape just a notch better. You that comes out in second is definitely more powerful as you get up over the top of them and evaluate them just in terms of spread and width and center cavity. That one, though, as we get nitpicky, maybe just a notch lower in the way she ties her neck into the front side of her body. Just a notch more mature there as you study her there at the base of her chest. And although she is deeper there at her forerib, she appears from the profile to get just a touch tighter as you take her back to your rear rib and flank comparative to our class winner. Really good pair. Congratulate these two exhibitors.
Results from that class. First place goes to Alyssa Kopp. Second place goes to Colton Spangler. Next in, we have our intermediate U lambs born January 2023 to February 15th, 2023. Charlotte Bowman of Montgomery, Lily Bowman of Montgomery, Carly Buchanan, Augusta, and Grayson Long Rockingham.
outlier in your class winner, just in terms of skeletal width and mass and bone and foot. Is this one refined and feminine up front? Probably not. Does she have an overwhelming advantage in power and functionality? In my opinion, yes. You get up over the top side of this one, and that's a sheep that's extremely pulled apart in terms of the center cavity. And because of that, she's got a tremendous amount of mass down the top side of her body. In my opinion, she is the most attractive in terms of her hip and hind leg posture. Could we make her just a notch neater at the point of her shoulder, freshen her hide ever so slightly? Definitely, but that's just kind of how she is. She's just the power sheep of the group. I think the pair here in second and third gets very, very close in my mind. You got a sheep that has an overwhelming advantage in terms of performance and dimension and just total width. That needs to be a notch better there at her rear leg structure. And then you've got a sheep that I think is as attractive as anything and functional as anything that is kind of getting out-horsed in here in terms of just body and mass and total dimension. So it gets really close in that pair. If you want to flip-flop those, I wouldn't disagree with you at all. The sheep here in third, again, extremely attractive, very feminine head of her blade. Sheep, when we get off to the side in terms of just total mass and dimension, is a distant third from that regard. But again, from a functionality standpoint, I like a lot of things about her. Then we'll round the class out with a sheep that's tremendous in terms of length of body and extension. One that probably offers some improvement there at her hind leg comparative to one or two that preceded her. For me, she gets just a notch dried out and not as fresh in terms of her appearance. And as we step back, she, to me, is the flattest there through the center of her cavity. And she's the highest, tapers the highest back there to her rear rib and flank.
For your Class 4 of Intermediate U lambs, first place goes to Carly Buchanan, Augusta County. Second, Grayson Long in Rockingham. Third place, Charlotte Bowman, Montgomery. And fourth place, Lily Bowman, Montgomery. Our next class are Dorset ewe lambs born on or after February 16th. 2 entries from Grayson Long of Rockingham County.
again, some give and take in the front end of the this particular class. You've got a ewe lamb that definitely is at a disadvantage in terms of depth, rib, and flesh that begins the class. And I think she does so just because of her basic build. Here's one that, as you study them through the front 1/3 of her body, she is pulled apart to wider there through the floor of her chest. The way her blade lays into the back front side of her rib cage is more appropriate. She is taller at the top of her shoulder and stronger from there to the center of her hip. Does she taper and get to a little bit flatter there from behind? Yeah. Is she a little, for me, a little raised? You study her through rear rib and flank, definitely. But I think she's got an advantage just in terms of structure and build. And then as we set them into motion, I view her to be just a shot bigger in terms of her bone and foot, just a touch more accurate in the way she comes to the surface off of her rear tube. The ewe that comes in second does have a distinct advantage in terms of center cavity. She is bigger there as you study her in terms of the span behind the backside of her shoulder. She does have a notch more hip and dimension from behind. For me, though, as I study them loose, she has a tendency to want to move with that rear structure just a notch too far up underneath herself. She is just a little bit coarser in the way she's built through the front 1/3 of her body, but a really nice pair. And we'll just go ahead and discuss, again, this pair of ewe lambs. Are they yours? Whose are they? They're yours? Okay. But again, kind of like with the pair we talked earlier, a lot of give and take and versatility when we decide to send bucks to either one of these. I think they both can offer your program something and maybe just a notch different in individually. Let's congratulate this young lady on a pair of nice ewe lambs.
So for that class, first and second place go to Grayson Long. And for the pair class, Grayson Long wins the pair class. We now have one entry from Bred and Owned Dorsets, one entry from Grayson Long. After that, we'll do best head of best three head, which will be exhibited by Grayson Long. Then we'll need all of our first and second places from the Dorset Show to come back in for the Dorset Registered Breeding Sheep Drive.
we've got our best of 3 out here, and the young lady owns all these. Kind of gave me a brief synopsis of what she's been doing over the last few years. Greatest way to figure out the challenges in the livestock world is to try to raise some of your own. There's a gentleman in Kentucky told me one time that if it was easy, everybody would do it, and it's not easy. I can guarantee you, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong, and typically it goes wrong with the best ones. The ones that you don't like would nuclear holocaust, but the ones you like, you just look at them wrong and something goes bad. So definitely encourage this young lady for taking a step in the right direction and raising her own. I think these are 3 awfully nice ewes. Let's give her a round of applause.
So your best 3 head was exhibited by Grayson Long. We'll now bring in all of our first and second places for the registered breeding Dorset Sheep Drive. We'll choose a champion and a reserve. Then we'll flow right into the Southdown show. In the show, Class 1, we need Marie-Claire DeRosier, 2 entries from Gannon Long, and 1 entry from Cade Altman.
real briefly, our yearling ewe is one that we discussed in class, had a distinct advantage just in terms of power. Take that one to the surface, and she's really stout and powerful there in her lower skeleton. A sheep that's got a tremendous rib cage and spread up high. One that we discussed, maybe not the most feminine ahead of her blade. One that gets just a notch coarser there as you study her at the point of her shoulder. It comes out of the next class is one that when we get her propped up, I like quite a bit in terms of the way she draws a really correct line from the top of her shoulder to the center of her hip. Sheep that's proportionate in terms of body depth from chest to flank. One that at times maybe gets just a little different there in terms of the way she comes to the surface off of her rear too. One that I'd like to pull apart ever so slightly in her upper hip and pin set, but a nice ewe. Sheep that comes out of the third class is one that is an outlier in terms of mass and power, maybe a little clubbier kind of in her look, but tremendous in terms of her rib cage, tremendous in terms of the dimension she possesses down the top side of her body. There's one that is ultimately the biggest in her upper hip. I read her to be the most correct in the way she comes to the surface in terms of her rear leg posture. And then we'll round the class out with the sheep that I think gets better with age. I think as this one matures and gets more flesh, I think that could be one that is awfully interesting because of her extra length of body, the extension she's got in front of her shoulder. Sheep that's really correct in terms of her upper hip set. Again, we stated maybe one that's just a little flatter as we study her from behind, maybe just a little greener as we study her there through her rear rib and flank. I'll go select your champion, and then we'll bring the next one up and get our reserve. Let's congratulate these exhibitors.
Your champion is exhibited by Carly Buchanan from Augusta County. Intermediate U. Your reserve comes out of the same class, exhibited by Grayson Long. In the senior ULAM class, that's up next, we need Carly Buchanan, Marie Claire DeRosier, Whitley Kopp, Colton Spangler, and Connor Spangler. All right, good job, Gannon, along with your pair. These are our senior ewe lambs born September 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. Carly Buchanan from Augusta County, Marie Claire DeRosier from Shenandoah County, Whitley Kopp from Washington, Colton Spangler from Floyd, and Connor Spangler from Floyd. We need our intermediate ewe lambs to check in. Intermediate ewe lambs, Bella Gibson, Caitlin James, Carly Buchanan, Lily Bowman, Charlotte Bowman, Marie Claire DeRosier, Hannah Giesemann, Whitley Kopp, and Gannon Long.
I think a really competitive pair on the front end of this class, and I'd be lying if I said performance didn't have some with the way we sort this pair today. There's a distinct and definite advantage in the ewe that leads the class in terms of just mass and total dimension. She's light years ahead of the one that sits in second. When you get up over the top side of their body and evaluate just the way she's pulled apart and broken open through the center of her cavity. A sheep that when you take him to the side, I love her silhouette. Near in terms of her top line, very feminine ahead of her shoulder, a sheep that gets out and travels extremely well and just has a tremendous amount of quality. If we're selecting sheep for weather production and show sheep production, we may switch gears and gravitate just a notch more towards the ewe that's in second. I think this one is awfully attractive and built correct through the front 1/3 of her body in terms of being really shallow at the base of her chest. Although she is green, she still sweeps down to a productive flank. I love the way her blade lays onto her body. I love the way her neck projects off the top side of her shoulder. She's really attractive in her hip and hind leg posture. That being said, I think we could fit two of her inside the one that wins this particular class, and I like that sheep, so that kind of makes the decision here for me. Sheep that comes out third, we need to freshen in terms of the way she's built through the center of her body. A sheep that when I get behind them, from her appearing to be stout from the outside, there's one that tapers a little bit more to her dock and flattens just a notch when we get behind them. She too is just a nickel courser as you study her up through the front 1/3 of her body. Ewe that comes out next is definitely taller shouldered than the one that preceded her. I think she lays her blade onto her body just a notch more. She's a tick better at the point of her shoulder. With that being said, I think the majority of her weight's being carried through the front 1/3 of her body. To be that practical and big through the center of her cavity, I'd like to soften and deepen her there through her rear rib and flank, either that or elevate her just a notch more through her chest floor to make her more competitive. Then we'll round the class out with a ewe that kind of corrects those criticisms. She is as good as anything from her chest to their flank in terms of being proportionate. For me, when we put her to the side, she's the shortest in terms of her neck, maybe one that's rocked just a notch more forward in terms of her blade and knee. She gets just a touch more upright in terms of the way she goes off of her rear too. Congratulations, kids. Let's give them a round of applause.
First place in our senior ewe lamb class goes to Carly Buchanan, second to Marie Claire DeRozier, third to Whitley Kopp, fourth to Colton Spangler, and fifth to Connor Spangler. Next up, we have our intermediate ewe lamb class. We have Bella Gibson from Louisa, Caitlin James from Madison, Carly Buchanan from Augusta, Lily Bowman with 2 entries from Montgomery County, Charlotte Bowman from Montgomery County, Marie Claire DeRozier from Shenandoah, Hannah Giesemann from Charlotte, Whitley Kopp from Washington, and Gannon Long with 2 entries from Rockingham.
little larger class, and with that, I think there's quite a few differences in the top five. Hopefully, at some point you have to make a decision if you're okay with some performance being given up, and I think to get the quality that I wanted at the front end, we have to tie to sheep that maybe just not as advanced as a few other ones. As they enter the ring, the ewe lamb that begins hits me really hard just in terms of her basic build. That's one that's got a tremendous amount of skeletal quality. You get in front of these, and she's easily the most opened up through the floor of her chest. She's really powerful as you get over the top side of her body in terms of the spread and mass that she has. A sheep that when we put them into motion, I wish she utilized her rear leg just a notch better. She wants to kind of stab it and get a little short in the way she goes. But beyond that, I think that's an awfully nice one to win the class. The ewe lamb that comes in second just kind of grows on you as you sort through them. She has a notch more extension through the front 1/3 of her body comparative to a couple behind her. I think that from a femininity standpoint, the way she lays her blade into her rib, the way her neck comes off the top side of her shoulder is all awfully good. She is as good in terms of her lower rib as anything in here. And then from a functionality standpoint, I may like her the best in terms of feet and legs. Does she have enough upper hip? Does she have enough stifle when we get behind? That becomes the decision that you've got to make. I think that's an awfully good, fault-free kind of sheep to be second. Ewe that comes out next, I have a tendency to catch her being just a notch lower in terms of how she's built at the top side of her shoulder. I think she's a little rounder at the point of her shoulder. For one that appears to be as massive as she is from the outside, I get up over the top of her, and to me, she just kind of reads just a notch flatter as I study her in terms of true center skeleton and true pin width and true flare there to the base of her leg. Really heavy duty at the surface, very and productive in terms of her look. Ewe that comes out next, definitely one of the more extended sheep in class. She is extremely broad over the top side of her body. She is extremely practical as we get into the center of her rib cage. For me, we need to lengthen her hip out ever so slightly. We need to change the way to the ground off of her rear too. She had a tendency to kind of move just a touch sickle hawk. Then we'll round the class out with a ewe that's really feminine, really extended, a great touch and freshness to her. I wish I could change the way she's built right through the center of her loin. She has a tendency to get just a little higher in her spine and a little rounder on her edges. She's not as heavy out as we take her to the ground comparative to a few that preceded her. Great class again. Let's congratulate these kids with a round of applause.
Results for our intermediate ewe lamb class. First place goes to Marie Claire DeRozier. Second, Bella Gibson. Third, Carly Buchanan. Fourth, Lily Bowman. Fifth, Gannon Long. Sixth, Whitley Kopp. Seventh, Hannah Giesemann. Eighth, Charlotte Bowman. Ninth, Lily Bowman. 10th, Caitlin James. And 11th, Gannon Long. That's entering the ring now is our junior ewe lamb class, born February 16th and later. We have Charlotte Bowman of Montgomery, Hayden Rubush of Augusta, Gannon Long of Rockingham, 2 entries from Cade Altman of Orange, and Whitley Kopp from Washington.
of type and kind. And there's things I'd like to alter and change about both of them, but I keep coming back to functionality, flexibility, and just a consistency when we put them in. The young man's ewe lamb, I think, is more appropriate in terms of the angle to her shoulder, the set there to her knee. I think this one's a little bit longer and more extended in terms of her neck. I think she draws from the top of her blade there to the center of her hip is good enough. Does she have a tendency at times to get just a touch higher through the center of her back? Yeah. But I think when we kind of get the head around and the neck up, I think all that kind of proportions and balance is quite a bit better. I see her being just a notch more practical as we work back to the rear rib and flank. I think that one from a proportionality standpoint is shallower at the base of her chest and still sweeps back to a more productive and practical flank. I think it gets close again. You wanted to switch these, I wouldn't argue with you. I guess I get, at times, I get a little critical and hard on the front 1/3 of their body. And this sheep, for me, appears to be just a touch shorter in terms of her neck. She's a little bolder and rounder there at the point of her shoulder. And then as we study this one, for having more flesh and more dimension, her chest in relation to her flank, we need to balance that just a notch differently. I think a majority of the weight, again, is through the front 1/3 of her body. We either need to shove her up in her chest floor or moderate her just a notch more in terms of rear rib and flank. Sheep that comes out in third definitely has more extension than the two that preceded her. She's one that, from a balance standpoint, again, we'd like to pull her down in her flank. At times, she has a tendency to get just a touch more up and down in terms of the angle to her hock and pastern. I guess it got close here between the three that will conclude the class. I thought there was a notch more quality through the front 1/3 of their bodies comparative to the two that fall behind this young lady. This sheep has been fit awfully well, maybe just a notch more correct in terms of her hip and hind leg posture. What we need to do with her is part and open her up through the center portion of her body to make her more competitive with those that preceded her. Then we're round the class out with two ewe lambs that have a tremendous amount of function and flexibility. We just need to provide them with a notch more power. As we get up over the top side of their body and we study them there in their pin set, we need to pull them apart and just make them a notch more powerful. Again, congratulate these kids.
Placements for that class. First place goes to Gannon Long. Second place, Whitley Kopp. Third place, Charlotte Bowman. Fourth place, Hayden Rubush. And fifth and sixth place go to Cade Altman. Now we'll have pairs of ewe lambs. We'll have a pair from Cade Altman, a pair from Charlotte Bowman, a pair from Lily Bowman, and a pair by Gannon Long.
So we get into our pairs here. I think quite a bit of competition. For me, there's a set that are just a notch more consistent in terms of their build, and as we break them down, I think their holes are smaller, and their quality is just a notch better. Young man right here will have first place. And then it gets closer in my mind. I think there's give and take. There's a sheep that to me is just a notch better in one of the pairs, one that is just a notch worse, and so there's some give and take. The young lady here in the pink will be second. The young lady here in the blue will be third, and the young man here in the orange will be fourth. Give these kids a round of applause.
To Kate Altman. Now we have bred and owned pairs. We have a bred and owned pair from Kate Altman and a bred and owned pair from Gannon Long. Nope. From the previous class, we picked Gannon Long first place for bred and owned pair, and second to Kate Altman for bred and owned pair. We now will choose our best three head, one exhibited by Kate and one exhibited by Gannon Long. We need all of our first and second place animals back for the South Down Champion Drive.
So very competitive Southdown show. Our first class is a sheep that's got an overwhelming advantage in terms of center skeletal width, just total mass and dimension. A sheep that is functional in terms of her basic build. Does she get just a little bit plainer up through her front end at times? I think so, and that just comes with extra maturity. But an awfully powerful and impressive ewe to win that first class. Coming out of Class 2 is a sheep that we talked about having an overwhelming advantage in that pair in terms of performance. I love the extra extension, the correctness and levelness that she possesses down the top side of her body. Very fundamental in terms of her basic build and very functional as we take her down to the surface. Is she wide enough? Is she pried open enough through the center of her body? Is she big enough in terms of her pin set? Does she have enough dimension there through the base of her leg? All questions you've got to ask yourself. Sheep that comes out of the next class just kind of radiates here from the side in terms of her quality, profile, and balance. One that's real heavy duty in terms of her build. At times I talked about her kind of stabbing there off of her back legs. Does she get just a hair awkward out of the top side, right at the top side of her blade? Maybe so at times, but that's an awfully high quality individual that combines some things that are hard to do. She's very practical, very dimensional, and then gives you a killer look from the side. And then we'll round out the last division was one I talked about in class, just a notch more slope to its shoulder, was just a little bit more flexible there at her knee. A sheep that I think was more appropriate when we studied the balance of the underline from chest to flank. A sheep that, again, is marginal from a muscularity standpoint. Does she have enough power to contend with a few others? Very competitive group. Let's congratulate these kids, and I'll select your champion in reserve.
Your champion is exhibited by Marie-Claire DeRogier from the intermediate class. Reserve was exhibited by Carly Buchanan from the senior U class. We'll now start into our all other breeds, and the Dorset champion in reserve. You should make your way back to the ready area. We have 3 classes of all other breeds, and then we'll do our Supreme Breeding U drive with Southdowns, Dorsets, and all other breeds. In our first all other breed class, we have 1 entry from Rachel Hale of Hanover for yearling ewes. Our second class of all other breeds will have 3 entries: Alyssa Kopp, Brody Sather, and Connor Spangler.
The AOBs, we've got a black-face cross here that has a tremendous amount of power. Study her up front, really broken open there through the floor of her chest. Tremendous in terms of her rib cage. One that's got an ample amount of flesh and freshness for having lambed already in her lifetime. I think she's got a lot of good going for her. Maybe times she gets just a little awkward in her top line, but a lot of that comes with having so much belly and so much dimension at this point. Let's congratulate this single entry on a job well done.
That That'll be a first place for Rachel Hale of Hanover with her yearling ewe. Next in, we have our intermediate ewe lamb class. We have Alyssa Kopp from Washington, Brader Sather from Louisa, and Connor Spangler from Floyd.
I think a good class of AOBs, and the sheep that begins has an advantage for me in terms of her hip and hind leg and the way she's leveler out to her dock, and she's more appropriate and functional in the way she comes down to the surface off of her rear too. At times it gets maybe just a little piecey, when we put her to the side. But right now, when she's braced, that's one that's tall, shouldered. She's correct in her top line. She's proportionate as we take her down to her rear rib and flank in terms of the way that balances with her chest floor. I think a sheep that has a lot going for her. The darker face sheep that comes out here in second is one that I love in terms of terminal shape, just expression and the mass that she has. For me, she gets a little bolder and coarser right through the point of her shoulder. She gets a little wastier in her breastplate. And then I've got, I find it hard to get those hind legs to be right at times. She has a tendency to kind of just set up underneath herself, and when she does that, she gets a little rounder in the way she's built out of her hip and rump. And then we'll conclude the class with a sheep that you really have to get up over to appreciate. Without a question, this is the freshest U in terms of her center cavity. She's really correct and balanced in terms of her top and bottom lines. As I take her to the ground, I find her to be just a notch smaller and more refined in terms of her foot size. She too has a tendency to get just a notch more up underneath herself when she plants and moves. And if we could change that about her, I think she gets quite a bit more competitive. Great class. Congratulate these kids one more time.
And results for that class: first place goes to Brody Sather, second to Connor Spangler, and third to Alyssa Kopp. Our final class of AOBs, we have a junior ewe lamb exhibited by Gage Sather of Louisa.
We've got a single entry, but an awfully nice sheep. I think it's impressive as you study just the amount of base width and practical traits that this ewe offers us. It's round and robust through the center of a cavity. As you study her in terms of her feet and leg posture, I think she's spot on. One that gets out and moves and travels extremely well. Young man seems to be quite knowledgeable and passionate about this particular breed. Let's congratulate him with a round of applause.
And that'll be a first place for Gage Sather with his Border Leicester lamb. We'll now call back our all other breeds for our all other breed registered drive. And then we'll do our Supreme Breeding ewe champion drive, including Dorsets and Southdowns.
Talked about her single entry in the first class is a ewe that's got plenty of base width and substance to her. At this point in her life, immaturity is not in her favor, so she's beginning to kind of look like an aged female, just getting a little piecier up front, a little awkward in terms of her top line at times. Sheep that comes out of the second class is one we talked about, really tall-shouldered, offering some improvements in terms of being a little neater in her breastplate, a little flatter or neater there at the point of her shoulder relative to the darker face sheep that was second in that particular class. We get her out here, and when she kind of locks in and drives, she's got a lot of neat pieces. And we just discussed a single entry that rounds out the third class. Very, very fundamental in terms of her basic build. And very high quality in terms of her look. Let's congratulate these exhibitors. I'll go select your champion in reserve at OB.
So your champion and reserve will come from the intermediate class. Champion is exhibited by Brody Sather, and reserve, Connor Spangler. Now for our Supreme Breeding ewe from the Dorsets, we need Carly Buchanan and Grayson Long. From the South Downs, we need Marie-Claire DeRogier and Carly Buchanan. And from all other breeds, we need Brody Sather and Connor Spangler.
We've had a really nice purebred show. Again, definitely blessed with the opportunity to sort through these and look forward to the weather show tomorrow and the use Sunday. But as we move in and talk about our Dorset, I discussed in breed was as an outlier in terms of mass. You bring her out here and she still is extremely pulled apart through the center of her body, extremely big and creased up down her back. That's one that's heavy duty and stout at her foundation. She's broken open really wide through the floor of her chest. Maybe she gets a little bolder up through the point of her shoulder, but that's kind of expected with that type. Do we wish we could probably just change her top line ever so slightly? I definitely do. She gets a little easier at times, right there in her top line, but in actuality, that kind of adds to her functionality and flexibility at times. The Southdown that comes out of the second Division I, we discussed having a tremendous amount of quality, putting quite a few things really that are challenging to do together, and that's what makes that one awfully impressive. And then we finished our AOB, a sheep that's toss-shouldered, sheep that's expressive and shapely in terms of her look, one that's maybe as compared to a few others out here now, maybe not as fresh today, and maybe not just at 12 o'clock in terms of bulk and density in terms of her body, but an awfully competitive group. Let's congratulate these exhibitors and everybody that's shown in the U show, and then I'll go select a champion in reserve.
Your Supreme Breeding ewe comes from the Southdown breed, and Reserve comes from the Dorsets. Congratulations, Marie-Claire DeRosier and Carly Buchanan. This concludes our breeding show and our sheep show for the day. We hope to see you back tomorrow morning.